Caliph felt the floor of the hangar shudder as her metal heels slammed into the chest of the warrior who had spent a decade telling her she was nothing. The impact was a symphony of hydraulic hiss and cracking bone. Around her, the air tasted of ozone and the terrified silence of the hegemony. If you believe that the soul is found in the hands that build rather than the fists that break, subscribe to join our journey through the stars. Now, let us look back at the scrap that started it all. 6 months ago, the hardest part of Kayla's morning was dragging her torso across the frozen gravel of the iron graveyard to reach the warm vent of a crashed freighter. The graveyard was a sprawling tomb of serrated titanium and forgotten history, where the weak were simply unmade by silence. Born without legs, in a culture that measured worth by the length of a stride, Caliph was a ghost. But ghosts have a way of haunting the machines the living have abandoned. Her secluded workspace was a hollowed-out reactor core, filled with the hum of scavenged lights and a small, multi-pronged diagnostic tool with a worn handle. That tool was her third hand, her only defense, and the one thing that didn't care about her bloodline. Steel and circuit don't care about your reach, only your intent. She spent her nights splicing forbidden human technology into Dracian power cells, proving she had a mind worth more than a soldier's brawn. Then came the disruption. His boots were too heavy, his breathing too rhythmic for a scavenger. Elias Thorne stepped into her sanctuary, his presence smelling of grease and tobacco. He didn't look at her missing limbs with the usual Draxian disgust. He looked at the Ghost 6 signal seeker she was currently dismantling. "That's a nasty bit of hardware," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Most people would just let it rot." Caliph didn't answer. She gripped her diagnostic tool tighter, the metal digging into her palm. She watched him move, an external observation of balance and casual strength. He wasn't pitying her. In fact, he looked like he was waiting for her to impress him. He tossed a damaged component onto her bench, a challenge wrapped in a shrug. Caliph worked with a frantic, precise velocity, her fingers dancing over the wires while Elias watched from the shadows. When the signal seeker finally chirped to life, she felt a flicker of something that wasn't just survival. It was self-actualization. Elias leaned against the reactor wall. "You're wasted here. I run a repair station 3 sectors over. We need someone who can speak to machines like you do." Caliph's jaw tightened. She had spent a lifetime in the shadows of Krell 9, hiding from the might makes right philosophy that would have seen her discarded at birth. Moving to a human station meant exposure. It meant risk. "I don't need help," she whispered, her voice raspy from disuse. "Have you ever had to choose between the safety of your cage and the terror of being truly seen? We'll be here tomorrow to see which path she takes." Elias didn't argue. He just left a set of coordinates and a small canister of high-grade lubricant for her joints. For 3 days, Caliph stared at that diagnostic tool, the worn handle a reminder of her isolation. On the 4th day, she began the long crawl toward the coordinates, choosing the dangerous path of collaboration over the familiar comfort of the dark. The transition from the silence of the graveyard to the human repair station was a blur of grinding gears and clinical white light. Elias Thorne didn't waste time with sentiment. He put Caliph to work on a massive human dropship, a vessel whose engine was a labyrinth of glowing conduits that seemed to pulse like a living heart. As she worked, she realized the humans were different. They didn't view a machine as a master to be feared or a tool to be discarded, but as an extension of themselves. The dropship's cooling system was a masterpiece of thermal dynamics, utilizing liquid nitrogen loops to counteract the heat generated by the ship's fusion core. Caliph's diagnostic tool clicked rhythmically against the hull. She was halfway into the ship's main turbine when a stabilizer bracket snapped. The ship shifted. A power surge roared through the frame, throwing Caliph from her perch. She plummeted toward the hard durasteel floor, the lack of legs making her descent a tumbling, helpless weight. A pair of massive, calloused hands caught her midair. Elias held her for a moment, his heartbeat steady against her back. He set her down on a workbench, then reached beneath it to pull out a crate. Inside lay a kinetic augment chassis, a pair of sleek carbon fiber legs powered by the same signal-seeking tech she had mastered. "I didn't ask for these," Caleth snapped, though her eyes lingered on the precision of the joints. "I know," Elias said, leaning back, "but the graveyard is behind you. You can keep dragging yourself, or you can see how far you can actually run." The decision felt heavier than the metal. To take the legs was to admit she was no longer the ghost of the Hegemony, but something entirely new. She strapped them on. The interface was seamless. Circuitry met nerve endings with a sharp electric sting that tasted like copper. She was still calibrating the stride when the hangar doors hissed open. 3 Draxian enforcers stepped in, their chitinous armor gleaming. At their center was Vrax, the warrior who had once thrown Caleth's childhood rations into the waste fire. He sneered, his eyes moving from her new legs to her face. "A parasite in steel," Vrax spat. "You think these toys make you one of us." And now, in the tribunal of the hangar, Caleth didn't feel like a ghost. She felt the floor shudder as her metal heel slammed into Vrax's chest. The impact sent him flying into a stack of fuel crates. The other 2 warriors reached for their shock staves, but Caleth was already moving. She wasn't walking like a warrior. She was dancing with a velocity they couldn't track. She didn't kill them. She simply dismantled their weapons with the same diagnostic tools she had used to survive the graveyard, leaving them disarmed and humiliated. "Leave," she said, her voice echoing off the dropship's hull. "The Hegemony has no claim here." Rax retreated, his begrudging respect buried under the weight of his defeat. As the hangar doors closed, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a quiet, terrifying vulnerability. She looked at her hands, then at the diagnostic tool. It was the same tool, but the handle didn't feel like a defense anymore. It felt like a key. She moved to the edge of the docking platform where Elias was already standing. The stars of Krell 9 stretched out before them, indifferent to bloodlines or strength. "I'm afraid," Caleth admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to belong." "Nobody does," Elias replied. "We just keep fixing things until they work." Caleth reached out and took his hand, her metal fingers interlacing with his human ones. She used her diagnostic tool one last time, fine-tuning the data link between her chassis and the station's grid, ensuring they were perfectly in sync. She stood tall and equal among the stars. The multi-pronged tool caught the light of the setting sun, no longer a weapon of the weak, but the instrument of a creator. "What do you think is the true measure of strength, the power to destroy, or the will to rebuild?"